Life moves fast, and your home is at the center of it all. Don't let plumbing issues put a stop to your daily routine. There's never a good time to experience a plumbing disaster, so make Legacy Heating and Air your first call at the first sign of trouble. Our team of local plumbing professionals is here to help with problems large or small. A stopped drain doesn't have to stop everything. Trust the on-time guarantee, expert advice, quality workmanship, and honest service you've come to expect from the Legacy team. Call or schedule online at legacyheatingandairinc.com.
Welcome to Football Never Sleeps, the weekly YouTube show all about Notre Dame football, and we're aspiring to be viral. I'm Eric Hansen. He's Tyler James, back from vacation, and we're 2 days out from the start of Notre Dame preseason camp. We're 1 day out from the players reporting. The media reported today to Notre Dame Stadium for our update on what rules we're allowed to break and which ones we're not allowed to break. But one of the rules we have today is that you enjoy yourselves and participate with us. And that means comments and questions. We'll take questions during the course of the show. So start filling up the question portal here and we will work you in. We got lots to talk about today. Also recruiting, lots going on there, especially with Tyler back. We're way more into it than when it was me minding the store. There's a few things to remember about defeating the YouTube algorithm. Tyler has all the details on those first, and then we'll get right into it.
Yeah, make sure you are subscribed to us here on the channel. Make sure that you are liking the video, sending comments. It really helps us. For those of you who are both commenting live and then commenting on replays. So we appreciate both of those folks who do those things. Hello to Jeff, Rajon, and Irish Fan. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Make sure that you turn on your notifications so you know when we're going live. We'll get back to a weekly schedule with both Eric and I now, with preseason camp starting later this week. We may have to move around based on Notre Dame's availability and stuff, but we'll make sure that we're here weekly. So if you turn your alerts on, you'll make sure that you don't miss if we're not live on Monday night like we try to. Even if you turn your notifications on, you can't prevent Eric from coughing. So I'm sorry if that's what you're hoping to do. But lastly, if you're new to the YouTube process, make sure that you can you click through to us on YouTube, whether it's on the desktop or on your mobile device, because you can't submit questions to us if you're watching us embedded somewhere, whether that's on social media, on InsideNDSports.com or the Insider Lounge. So we appreciate everyone being here, and I'll throw it back to Eric.
Yeah, I was just getting choked up at Tyler talking. We do really appreciate our guest co-hosts that we had the last couple of weeks, Bob Morton and Tom Lemming. So today, Monday, July 29th, we're taking stock of Notre Dame football as preseason camp gets set to open on Wednesday with a morning practice fully open to the media. Notre Dame players report back to campus on Tuesday. There are 86 scholarship players, one over the limit, and that limit is not going to be around much after this year. It's on track to increase to 105, but we still have it this year. Notre Dame does not have to get down to 85 until the first day of fall semester class, which is August 27th. So that's the Tuesday of Texas A&M game week. We're going to launch right into our opening drive, which is a training camp breakdown. And Tyler, I know that you probably had a honey-do list or a to-do list, if you call yourself honey, I don't know. But Marcus has one of those. 5 things on the top of head coach Marcus Freeman's to-do list. That's where we're going to start, and I'll let you do your 5, and then I'll do my 5, and we'll see if we align.
Well, I'm glad my to-do list no longer is like get things done around my new apartment, and it's now back to work. But I think beyond the obvious of complimenting Eric Hansen when Marcus Freeman steps to the podium on Wednesday, I think the top 5 things that should be on his to-do list are such. One is name a starting quarterback. I think Notre Dame should just save the song and dance and deal with the reality of the situation and do what everyone believes is what is going to be done, and that's Riley Leonard as the starting quarterback. Number 2, find answers on the offensive line to allow for cohesion. Notre Dame has some question marks still there. I think the sooner they settle on choices allows a unit that hasn't played together in its construction very often to sort of get on the same page. Circling back to the quarterback, I think it's important. Number 3, building trust between Riley Leonard and his wide receivers. Not only, like I said, Riley Leonard being appointed the quarterback, but if he is, if that does happen soon, that allows more time for him to get on the same page as receivers, make up for some lost time from the spring when he was injured, and get things rolling in the right direction, because that is a big part of what this needs to happen for Notre Dame's offense to sort of maximize its potential. I guess I went pretty quarterback heavy here. Number 4, I had to keep the backup quarterbacks invested. I think that's easier said than done, but not just Steve Angeli, but Kenny Minchie and CJ Carr, making sure that those guys are continuing to develop and being in a position to contribute when asked. I think that's very important, especially with Riley Leonard's injury history and the likely want and need to use him as a runner. I think having guys ready to go, which Notre Dame should be in a good position to do, is very important. It's all offense except for the last one. My last one was establish a plan at cornerback if Benjamin Morrison can't play at Texas A&M. I don't know that we know for certain that Benjamin Morrison will play in that game. I think that's the hope, but I think you have to be prepared for that to not happen, to put yourself in a best position if Benjamin Morrison can't play. And so on a defense that doesn't have a ton of question marks and has a lot of experience, I think that's something that should be getting priority early on in preseason camp. How does that list stack up to yours?
That's pretty good. And I saw Rajon's comment that he said, Tyler, you were missed. Eric did a good job, but was sweating at different points. And the biggest sweat came from when I realized I didn't hit the hit live button on the first one I did with Bob Morton. The second time was Tom Lemming's phone overheating and our recruiting one on Saturday. I thought, Tom is lucky if he gets his phone to come on. How are we going to get it back on when there's a problem? So those were
you were sweating and his phone was sweating is basically what was happening.
Exactly. Well, to my list, I did not put the quarterback thing on there only because, and I know we're going to talk about it, Marcus has been doing some interviews, some national interviews this summer, and he's never kind of tried to set the pretense that it was anything but Riley Leonard. So there has not been an official announcement. He needs to make that, and I think he'll do that Wednesday, if not before, in some social media graphic. But he's not been saying, well, whoever our quarterback is, he's been talking about Riley Leonard. So for me, number 1, and again, these are not in order, I just need to number them, set the tone, messaging, and leadership for the season. So Marcus will come up with, certain things he wants to stress that's different about this year. And he also wants to be consistent with that messaging. I think the leadership takes care of itself, but there's the business of electing captains. I think we'll get to that pretty quickly within camp. But you can be a leader and not be a captain as well. Whether Jack Kaiser's a captain or not, he's a leader on this team, for example. Number 2, I very much agree with getting the offensive line in order and developing. There's a couple of position battles there, and then get their cohesion and their chemistry moving in the right direction against maybe the best defensive line they'll see this season. Really good edge rushers on Texas A&M's team. I had for number 3, get the team ready for being a more effective road team this year, starting with one of the tougher road assignments in college football at Kyle Field in its opener. And part of that's going to be the new communication systems. And it's not going to be all helmet communications because there's a cutoff time before the snap and there's still things going on. So there's still going to have to be some hand signals. There's also going to have to be a system in place in case those helmet communications fail. Number 4, special teams details, pecking order with returners on punts and kickoffs. We kind of saw a big group of guys. I think we have a pretty good feel of who's going to be the primary returners, but they need to kind of sort that through. and then drill down on who the coverage and return personnel, the field goal PA teams, punt block, etc. And then for me, continue to explore the offense. They did some of that in the spring in terms of what fits this team well, how they can maximize the skill sets of the quarterbacks, the wide receivers, Jeremiah Love and the running backs and so forth. They need to continue that process, and that'll continue as we get into the season. I don't think we're going to see close to a finished product as far as all the different options there till maybe we get to the Louisville game or so forth, where it's on all cylinders, where they got all pages of the playbook. And even then, I remember in 2015 when Deshaun Kaiser took over from Malik Zaire, Mike Denbrock told me that they were still feeding Deshaun Kaiser things every week, giving him a little bit more of the playbook. Now, that was a redshirt freshman versus a guy that's a senior, but this offense is new to him. So those are my top 5.
I got to say, your list sounds more like someone that spent a lot of time thinking about Notre Dame football in July, where mine's list sounds more like a guy that hasn't been thinking that much about it. Mine were more obvious. I think yours were more in the weeds and definitely important. So interesting. I think our lists were pretty far apart, except for the offensive line part, in terms of the details that we're looking forward to seeing Marcus Freeman drilling down on early on in preseason camp.
Well, I thought your list was wonderful. So you mentioned the quarterback thing, and I think there certainly was the potential, and Brian Kelly did this sometimes when he absolutely knew the quarterback. Charlie Weiss did it sometimes too, kind of held out. Now, it doesn't look like Marcus is going to do that. Do you feel like just getting it out of the way? Why do you feel like that was the best? Because that was one of your points, was name the starting quarterback. So why do you feel like that's the best way to handle it instead of having the pretense that there's a competition going on?
I just think there's too much transition in the offense to sort of draw it out.
Yeah.
Because to me, the only one who really benefits for it not being official is Steve Angeli, right? Who else on the offense really benefits from not knowing who the starting quarterback is besides the guys that are trying to be the starting quarterback? So I just feel like it's better for the whole of the offense to have it clear, hey, this is the pecking order. This is how we want to move forward. This is how we're building an offense around Riley Leonard, and this is how we want these pieces to amplify his skills. And then also, obviously, you can continue to build around Steve Angeli and what it would look like with him in the offense. But I just think there's so much change at wide receiver, at offensive line, and obviously Riley Leonard being new, that I think it's important to sort of have that established early on, to get things headed in the right direction as soon as you can. Do you agree with me?
I do. I think everybody would see it as a ruse anyways at this point. Riley Leonard really took control, and you saw snippets of it, bringing the teammates down to Fairhope, Alabama, working with Phillip Rivers. Riley Leonard lighting it up at the Manning Passing Academy against some of the best quarterbacks in college football. Marcus talking about how good Riley Leonard's leadership has been. It would really be kind of silly at this point to say, well, all 4 of them are going to get first team reps. I really thought your part about keeping the backups engaged is important though too, because Duke got down to its 3rd string quarterback last year. It wasn't just Riley Leonard and his backup. They got down to number 3, and that happens sometimes. And Notre Dame needs to be prepared for that. And I think that's one of the big pluses about Steve Angeli. As much as a lot of us are in love with the intrigue of Kenny Minchie and the potential of CJ Carr, Steve Angeli's a known quantity at this point. And I think you can win games with Steve Angeli and do it without some growing pains. So I think that's pretty important. We talked about the captains a little bit, and Riley Leonard could be a captain. He may not be. I'm guessing that he probably will be. For somebody that, was more part of a college football program than I was in the stands having a rum and Coke, and you were at least on the sideline with a bad knee, if not in the game. How how important to team dynamics is to get the captains right, and the timing of it and all that, or is it more ceremonial and the guys that are leaders are going to lead whether or not they're captains?
I think there's a few different things there. I think it is important to get it right. I think sometimes you could have a player who maybe gets named a captain that people maybe roll their eyes at, or maybe tries too hard to be a captain and maybe doesn't have that same respect from the players, but the coaches really like. And so I think that would be a way you could get it wrong. That other than that, I think getting the timing of it is important. I think the importance of the timing depends on the situation. I think with such a veteran roster that Notre Dame has, especially on defense, I don't think it's as big of a deal. Like, they didn't need to name captains going into the summer or anything like that. I do think it is important that Notre Dame has some clear leadership on offense when it feels like those people have ascended into those roles. So yeah, I mean, I think it does matter. But you're right that, like, guys are going to lead regardless of whether or not they're the captain or not. I think it's not great if the guys that people want to follow are the guys that aren't the captain. I think sometimes that could put you in a sticky situation. And I think would be an indication of either a flawed voting process or maybe a bad pulse of the team from the coaching staff.
And then, we've seen different numbers of these guys. Yeah. We've seen different ways to select them. We've seen player votes. We've seen a coach pick the captains before, and we've seen a combination where, like, Charlie would veto some of them and put his guys in sometimes. So, I mean, I guess that probably depends on the team, or do you think there's a best way to do those things?
In terms of the voting process or whatever, our appointing process, I think it should be heavy on the player side of it. I do think that the coaching staff should reserve the right to sort of figure out, okay, we want this number on offense, this number on defense, or those kinds of things, or maybe someone that they feel like is very emblematic of the program and maybe isn't necessarily going to be an impact player, but can have a significant role as a leader, or that respect is earned. I think sometimes that can be important. It sort of depends on what you need from your captains. I think that probably also dictates the number that you want too. I think I have no problem with it varying from year to year. I think it should be reflective of what your needs are as a team and as a coaching staff. But I don't like when it gets too big. I think it sort of waters it down and ruins sort of the meaning of it. But I think you got to have at least two. So I would say that, like, anywhere 2 to 5 seems the sort of like the sweet spot to me. But it's not something I'm going to, like, pick a coach apart about how many captains they picked or not, or how many they let the players vote for, because I think the fact that there is leadership and some sort of chain of command and communication between those two, I think that's probably the process moving forward with the captains is as important of who the captains actually are. How does Marcus Freeman and the coaching staff to talk to those players, and what sort of feedback do they get, and what sort of direction do they give those players as well?
Our next segment, we're going to talk about the people to watch during training camp, and that can be coaches, players, media, but we didn't make the list unless Tyler's list is really bizarre. But before that, would you like to go to some questions, Tyler?
Yeah, we can get to the Jeff Stevens question segment of today's show. Okay. Appreciate Jeff for being active. If anyone else has questions, please don't be shy. Please feel free to reach out and ask us something. First one from Jeff Stevens was, assuming a decent year for Marcus Freeman and a normal course of business events, would an extension of his contract be in order as we approach the end of the year?
Well, he's getting to the end of year 3, and isn't his contract 6 years and not 5? I thought it was so. 5 or 6. I don't know that you need to do that. I mean, here's the thing. People might use it again in recruiting if they think Notre Dame wouldn't retain Marcus. I don't think that that's an issue. And then locking him in, you're just basically putting a dollar figure on the buyout. So I don't know that it makes sense at this point. I mean, his offensive coordinator has a 4-year contract and his defensive coordinator has a 3-year contract extension. So I think that says something about their confidence in Marcus Freeman. I'd probably wait until after year 4.
Yeah, I think obviously the coaches and agents are going to push for
Sure.
extensions sooner rather than later. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if after year 3, and if it goes, especially if it goes particularly well, that Notre Dame would look to extend that. I believe you were right that it was a 6-year contract for Marcus Freeman from Notre Dame. So it's not like you're getting dangerously close to the end of it. But I think right now, after 2 seasons, I think I mean, I guess if I'm Notre Dame, I think if I am offering an extension, I don't think it's a lucrative one, right? Like, it's not like Marcus Freeman has done things for the program that no other coach has done. Like, I think what he's done is respectable, but it hasn't been overly impressive to this point. I think the way he's building the program and the effort that's being put into recruiting leads to you to believe that things are going in the right direction, but things need to play out on the field in a more positive way for you to feel really confident about where things are going, because that's what pays the bills in the end. So I think at the end of the year, it's probably when those conversations would maybe start in earnest. And I think depending on how the year goes would probably dictate in which way that would go.
Okay.
All right. Another question from Jeff. Eric predicts Notre Dame at 11-1 and at number 6 preseason. Would Louisville be other receiving votes? Any other sleepers in the ND schedule?
Do you want to take that first, or you want me to jump on?
I'll let you handle that first, since you've already thought about it.
Right. Well, I did my top 25 ballot last night, and I did a story about it today. And Sporting News did a really good kind of capture of 8 different media outlets that have done preseason polls to this point and did a composite of it. And Louisville was in also receiving votes. So Florida State and Texas A&M and USC were the teams that were consensus top 25 teams. Texas A&M near the bottom of that list. And yeah, Louisville was one of those. And then I don't think that there was any of the other teams that was even under consideration. So that would be also my guess. And when I picked 11-1, and Jeff, you probably remember from the show, I wasn't specific about who I thought the loss was going to come to. I just thought at one point there was going to be a game where it didn't go Notre Dame's way, whether it's turnovers, weather, or whatever. I thought I'm not writing off 12-0, but I think that's probably the most likely scenario for me.
Yeah. Did you identify sleepers in the schedule at any point?
I did. Georgia Tech. I thought because they were really good on offense and really bad on defense, but they played Georgia to 8 points. It was a 31-23 game. They romped over UCF in their bowl game, and they were competitive in most games because of their offense. It just was, they couldn't stop people. And again, if you get in a turnover game with them and they can kind of hold on to the ball, then it can become a problem. And the game is in their backyard. It's in Atlanta. It's not in their stadium. It's in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. But I think they're the sleeper team or the trap team for me.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. Virginia's a team that's somewhat intriguing to me. Like, what can that offense become? Now, obviously, when you talk,
I was surprised. Did you see the ACC picks for them?
I did not know.
They were like picked 16th or 17th.
Oh, they were very 17th,
which and Stanford was at the bottom of that. It surprised me how low, but I agree. I think Virginia's in a great place without interrupting you too much in terms of being between Florida State and USC, these big games that require their attention, and then the weird game against Army where you have to defend a different offense. I do think Virginia is a team I would have strongly considered, but I was really thrown by what the ACC media and coaches think of them.
Yeah, and I think their quarterback situation is a little uncertain, but I think at that point of the year, you would like to think that they'd have things ironed out by then. So I don't know that there's a lot of good candidates for that question. I mean, Purdue is a team that seems to have a history of always being a sleeper team,
and picked 18th.
And yeah, I don't.
18 Big Ten.
Right. There's no reason to believe Purdue would be that team, but it seems like they just have a history of doing that, no matter who the coach is, seemingly. So maybe they can sneak up on Notre Dame early in the season, but I would be a little surprised by that.
The two MAC schools got picked high. Miami's picked to win, and Northern Illinois was picked, I think, tied for third.
Yeah, and it's hard to know with MAC teams given the transfer portal situation, because they're going to lose some guys that are like taking a step up, but they're also probably going to bring in guys that maybe just didn't get a good shake at their previous situation, or maybe they had injury problems, and so they decided to try it somewhere else, and maybe those programs sort of shine up a guy that maybe didn't have as much success as he wanted to. So I think the transfer portal makes those kinds of teams even harder to get a grasp on what their reality will be. So I'm interested to see what sort of challenges those teams pose to Notre Dame. All right. Paul Kinlan says, how about a prediction about a nice surprise at wide receiver who really shines this year? New guy, ?
A surprise at wide receiver. In the spring, it was Micah Gilbert. In the fall, the two guys that we didn't see were Bo Collins, who's the transfer from Clemson, and Logan Saldate, the freshman from California who plays slot receiver, which is a pretty deep position. And yet Marcus in June felt really good about Logan at least contributing a little bit, not backburnering him for this year. For me, I mean, Bo Collins is the wild card. Just the fact how they've rolled him out as one of the guys on their team, guys to know. Marcus had a pretty interesting explanation of why they thought he was so good coming out of the transfer portal.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it would be Bo Collins. Beyond that, maybe somebody that didn't show everything in the spring. I mean, maybe KK Smith or Cam Williams. I mean, there's a path to playing time behind Chris Mitchell for those guys. So maybe those would be mine.
Yeah, I think for those guys, it would almost be, if they're a surprise, that means there's probably a disappointment with Chris Mitchell. So it's like, do you want that kind of surprise or not? I think Bo Collins is a good pick. I don't really know what to expect. He's one of the people that I'm the most intrigued about watching in preseason camp, because we just haven't seen him. I don't know what to make of his Clemson career. I think he's very talented. Did not sort of maximize his production at Clemson. Was that a product of the offense and the quarterback play? Is it a product of some of the injuries he played with? A lot of factors that make me not really certain of what Bo Collins' role will be, but he's someone that if he sort of reaches his potential, I think could be a very impactful receiver for Notre Dame. Some of that maybe would be just more of a surprise based on their career as a receiver would be Jaden Harrison from Marshall. He wasn't exactly a go-to guy in the Marshall offense. No more for his kick returning accolades. Maybe he can find something within his game or find a role in Notre Dame's offense that can allow him to do that. I think the biggest problem is that he's playing a slot position where Notre Dame has some good options at already. So I don't know if he can break through there and be that surprise. But because of those other options, I think that would lead to the possibility of him being a surprise, because I don't know that a lot of people would expect that to happen.
I'll add a couple things about Bo Collins. We got a chance to talk to all the summer newcomers, and Bo Collins definitely feels like a guy that's energized by this change of scenery. And the other thing was, after those interviews, I had parked my car wherever he was going, so we were kind of walking together, and he definitely looks the part. So,
how much faster did he walk than you?
Well, I was holding on to the back of his shirt, so.
All right. A follow-up from Todd Crawl with our Marcus Freeman contract conversation. Do we know the official per year of Marcus's contract? Wasn't it reported not too long ago to be between the $6 to $7 million range? Just curious.
I don't remember because those are things I don't file away. I would have to look that up. And I don't think it's official, but I do think we have a ballpark figure of what it is. Notre Dame doesn't have to report that. So when you add in all the outside income and everything, it's got to be more than what Mike Denbrock and Al Golden are making. They're making a lot.
Yeah, I believe John Bryce of Football Scoop had originally reported it was a 6-year, $42 million contract. So I haven't spent a lot of time following up on that. But yeah, I think we're all on the same page there, Todd, with what the range of Marcus Freeman's contract should be worth. But yeah, like you mentioned, there's always other revenue that sort of gets generated for the head coach at Notre Dame as well. So I don't think Marcus Freeman, even though he has lots of kids, is hurting in the money department. There was someone, I can't remember which recruit it was. His quote to me was, "Oh no, it was Ivan Taylor," who, unfortunately for Notre Dame fans, didn't stick in Notre Dame's class. When I asked him about spending time at Marcus Freeman's house during his official visit, he described it as "you can't hide money." So he was impressed by Marcus Freeman's house and what that affords him in South Bend, Indiana.
Okay, we're going to move on. I want to say hi to Eric Swope. Eric is on my Facebook page a lot in comments, and it's nice to see you in the comments here.
All right, thanks. Welcome to Eric.
And great name. Your parents had good taste. So on Sunday on InsideNDSports.com, I did an analysis of the 10 people to watch in preseason camp. As I mentioned, they can be players, coaches, trainers, anyone associated with the program. My list was limited to players/coaches. Do you want to do a top 5 or top 10, Tyler?
I made a top 5, so
okay, let's just do our top 5s then.
Okay, let's go. How about this? Let's go back and forth, and let's start at 5.
Okay, I'll let you go first, and then I'll do mine. Did you see mine or no?
I did glance at it, but I don't.
Okay.
I don't have.
You don't have it committed to memory?
No, I know.
Neither do I. I had to write it down.
I know who you have at number 1, but
okay. The tip off was the picture.
Yeah, I didn't even have to read it to know that, but I did browse it. Okay, so my number 5 was left tackle Charles Jagusa. How much of a learning curve does he have still left, more so physically than mentally, and just sort of what are realistic expectations for him as the starting left tackle, which we believe he will be at this point. Obviously not a lot of experience there, but a lot of expectations. What does he look like with a full off season preparing to be the left tackle at Notre Dame, and can he sort of meet those high expectations?
For me, I went at number 5 with Chris Mitchell, the transfer wide receiver from Florida Atlantic. He went from like 23 catches to 64 last year. He was over 1,000 yards, and he had been slowly developing. And then all of a sudden there was this breakout season. Well, can that translate to better competition in this level? And why I picked him out of the wide receivers was because of his elite speed. And you look at Mike Denbrock's history, and even at Notre Dame, he had Will Fuller in 2015 when he was calling plays, and he had Kevin Stefferson for part of 2016 when he was behaving himself. And when he has a guy who can take the top off a defense at that field receiver position, it really opens things up for everybody else. And so for me, that's what Chris Mitchell can be. I think I don't know that he's going to be Notre Dame's leading receivers, but if he can at least affect how a defensive coordinator defends Notre Dame's total offense, I think he's going to be very valuable.
Yeah, I like Chris Mitchell a lot. I did not see as much from him this past spring when he first got to Notre Dame as I was hoping. Like, I thought I would be maybe more impressed or see him flash more than he did in the practices we saw. Obviously, he had the one long touchdown in the blue gold game, but you could have caught that pass.
Yeah,
and he wasn't going up. he wasn't going up against Notre Dame's best cornerbacks in that situation either. So, I think there's more to see there from him. So I think that's a good pick. All right, my number 4 is right tackle Emil Wagner. Can he become the starter? Can he unseat Tosh Baker as the guy who started in the Sun Bowl? Has he developed to the point where he's physically capable of handling the demands of playing offensive line at the college level? That's always been the question about Emil Wagner. His athleticism is obvious. Is he ready to make that step? And if he is, how much better does that make Notre Dame's offensive line?
Yeah, I would say Emil Wagner is also my number 4. And I think he's symbolic of the whole offensive line. But I picked him out again because these guys that are emerging, that are in these position battles, they're talented. I mean, they were coveted players. Emil was a really late rising prospect. He went down to the All-Star game in San Antonio, and I don't remember what it was called, if it was the U.S. Army or just but it was the All-Star game in San Antonio. And even as an undersized guy, he impressed the evaluators enough to really rise him in the Rivals 250 rankings because they got a glimpse of who he could be. Well, if not now, then when? I think this is the time for him. And I think you will be able to follow this theme with other offensive linemen too. So Emil Wagner for me at number 4.
All right, my number 3 is Riley Leonard. Even though I assume he is the starter, I want to see how ready he is. Are there signs that he is on the path to reach the heights that he reached during his sophomore season at Duke? Because I think, we sort of know this sort of story with Sam Hartman. I think he holds the keys in terms of unlocking Notre Dame's offense to another level. So we'll get our first real glimpse of what that may look like here in preseason camp.
Riley Leonard is also number 3 for me, and he is already an accomplished runner. Even with a bad ankle, he averaged over 6 yards a carry last season, and he rushed for almost 700 yards in his last fully healthy season, 13 touchdowns. He is one of the mechanisms that you can use when teams throw a loaded box at you that Notre Dame didn't have last year. But what we need to see Riley Leonard do in training camp is become an accomplished passer. We need to see him throw the ball downfield. He has the big arm. We need to see him be accurate. And that's what Gino Guidugli, Riley Leonard, and Mike Denbrock are charged with this coming month.
All right. My top 2 guys are the guys we haven't been able to see yet because they transferred in during the summer officially. So my number 2 is safety Rod Hurd. What does he look like in Notre Dame's defense, playing a safety role after spending so much time as a nickelback at Northwestern? How does he fit next to Xavier Watts? There's a lot of promise there, but I just need to sort of see it for my own eyes to get a grasp of what that looks like in Notre Dame's defense, and maybe a position that doesn't feel like the biggest need for Notre Dame because of all the talent in the secondary. But I think one that can really allow the defense to continue to take another step, especially if he can be a playmaker. I think that was for what DJ Brown offered Notre Dame's defense last year as sort of a steady force at safety. He wasn't a playmaker back there. Obviously, Xavier Watts did plenty of that, but it would be nice to have that on both sides of your safety position. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Rod Hurd looks like in camp.
My number 2 was Marcus Freeman, the head coach, and I have him here. I think he's accomplished a lot for a young coach in his first 2 years in terms of proving he's a leader, proving he can manage a roster, being in step with all these seismic changes in college football. What he hasn't done to this point is have a command on game day, have a command of some of the road challenges. And I think those are the growth areas that he needs to show this year. Year 3 in Notre Dame history has been incredibly defining. it seems like coaches either win national championships and go on to be great coaches, or they struggle in year 3 and they're out of here after 5 years. A guy that did kind of an in-between was Brian Kelly, who went 12-0 and played for a national championship and lost. And that's kind of what his legacy was a guy that got to Notre Dame back to the next level, but didn't quite get them over the hump. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see how much better Marcus is at the areas that he has to work on in year 3.
Yeah, I left coaches off my list. Maybe because I was taking watch maybe more literally than you were thinking about it. Because I just think they're going to show us so little in terms of what the coaches can do in terms of impacting this team in preseason camp. But I do think you're right. Like, there is a lot that Marcus Freeman can and needs to show in terms of the leadership of this program, the direction that it's heading. It seems like obviously the confidence is in him within the program with the hires that he's been able to make. And so this is a very important year for Marcus Freeman. Obviously the year 3 at Notre Dame is a big deal, which will probably be talked about ad nauseum, especially as long as Notre Dame wins games to start the season. So that's why I didn't include coaches, but I understand why you went with that.
Right. And he is up for an Emmy Award for his acting.
All right.
Or a Huey Award.
Do you think we can get Emmys for our Football Never Sleeps performances, or?
I hope so. We have theme music coming up. I'll just tease that to you guys sometime here very soon. So,
and neither Eric nor myself were the ones that put the music together. So that's
I got very, very, very.
So raise your expectations.
Yes.
All right. Number 1 on my list was wide receiver Bo Collins. We've talked about him already. He is someone that I think if he reaches his potential can really make a difference in Notre Dame's offense. What sort of impact can he make? I think it's to be seen. And like I said with Rod, like, he was a guy that wasn't able to be with the Notre Dame in the spring in terms of practicing because he was still finishing up his degree work to get his undergrad degree so he could complete a graduate transfer to Notre Dame. But now he's a Clemson grad. He was at least, and both were here to sort of take part in meetings and listen and get all sorts of information about what they need to know. But in terms of getting out on the field for practices, we didn't get to see that. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing what Bo Collins looks like in camp.
For my number 1, I went with Mike Denbrock. I think in concert with Riley Leonard, this changes the game for Notre Dame on offense. And we may not see it on August 31st, but I think at some point we will, and we'll see it for years to come. This is a great direction for Notre Dame. This is what they lacked last year when there were the big peaks and valleys. I mean, if you remember, Notre Dame set a program record for total points and total points last year. They were second in points per game, the most since 1912. I mean, there were all kinds of offensive records, but in the games that they lost, they looked nothing like that offense. And so I think you will get, against really good defensive coordinators, you will get a better quality offensive product. Just the way that Mike Denbrock was helped Jaden Daniels evolve. I mean, this is a guy that was in the 130s, 131, I think it was, at Arizona State his last year there. 2 years later, he sets the NCAA record for pass efficiency at 208.0. His rushing went up each year. And you look even at wide receivers that were first-round draft choices, Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. And I don't think Malik was a 5-star guy coming out of high school. They grew tremendously under Mike, and that was their position coach and within the Mike Denbrock offense. I think he will bring out the best in Notre Dame's offensive players, which, to go along with the really good defense Notre Dame has, I think Mike Denbrock tops my list. Plus, he owes me a lunch.
You are right on Neighbors. He was a 4-star prospect, but he wasn't even in the Rivals 250 in his recruiting class. So certainly exceeded the expectations of him from our rivals. recruiting analyst team that does a lot of hard work to try and get as close to right as it can with those high school projections.
So the rest of my top 10, and you can read the article and find out why I put them there. 6 was Benjamin Morrison, 7 Jordan Botello, 8 Jack Kaiser, 9 Jeremiah Love, and 10 Mitchell Jeter. And if you wonder who's Mitchell Jeter, that's the kicker from South Carolina that transferred in. So Tyler, before we get to the next part of this, do you want to go back to the question queue?
The only questions I have are recruiting ones. Okay. So let's hold on to those.
Okay. So beyond players like Emil Wagner and Rocco Spindler, who are involved in obvious position battles at the top of the depth chart, who are a few guys, let's say younger or developing players, and you can throw Bo Collins in there too, who come to mind who can improve their equity roles in August. So some of these guys showed up in June. Some of these guys just didn't have their chance in the spring to really show themselves.
Yeah, I think well, thank you for allowing me to include Bo Collins on this list, but I will pass on that opportunity. The wide receiver I put on here was KK Smith. Is he someone that can be in the 2 deep moving forward? I think it would be nice to have another field wide receiver threat behind Chris Mitchell. And I'm interested to see if he can sort of emerge as someone that can be there. Cooper Flanagan is someone who certainly had plenty of time to show himself in the spring because of the injuries at the tight end position. But I'm sort of curious of what that looks like going into this season with Mitchell Evans and Eli Raridan back. How much of workload can he handle if needed? Can he let Notre Dame work Evans back slowly? What sort of role does he find? Because I really think the ceiling is high for Cooper Flanagan. I've been very impressed with what I've seen of him so far. Boubacar Traore, anytime you talk about guys that are rising or guys you want to see more of, he's always on my list. Can he be trusted as a number 2 Viper? Can he sort of put the heat on Jordan Botello at that position? Christian Gray, I feel like in my head he's more proven than he actually is, just because of the faith that I have in his ability. But like I mentioned earlier, Benjamin Morrison's on the men. While Morrison is sort of getting back into the mix, can Christian Gray prove to be good enough that he can maybe stay in the starting lineup regardless if Morrison is on the other side? I think there's going to be a pretty good battle there with Jaden Mickey, but I shouldn't speak for both of us. Although I think I believe you agree with me that Christian Gray has such high potential, but we haven't been able to see a ton of him in action yet. And then my maybe biggest reach was Donovan Heinisch. Al Washington seems to mention him any chance he can. So I don't think there's a lot of expectations that he can make a serious dent in the rotation when you have Howard Cross and Riley Mills, Gabriel Rubio, and Jason Anye there. But I think Donovan Heinisch continues to be mentioned. I think certainly Kurt was his older brother was overlooked for a while, improved to be a very valuable member of Notre Dame's defense. And I think it may only be a matter of time till Donovan Heinisch is as well.
I went a little bit deeper on the depth chart for some of mine. I mean, I threw Bo Collins in there. I threw Jaden Osbury because Jaden Osbury started to get this utility role of being a guy that was just too good not to play. Mm-hmm. But I think he can further define it. But I went with 3 guys that were 3rd on the depth chart or lower. I went with Bryce Young just because he's coming along. And I think the 2 guys in front of him are really good. And RJ Oben and I'm losing his name.
Joshua Burnham.
And then I went with Tay Johnson just because he's such a good athlete.
Yeah.
If he can hone in on being the backup nickel, I think he can get on the field some, or he can get into some packages just because of his athletic ability. I put Logan Saldate maybe for special teams. I just think he'll do really well. So those were some of the guys that came to mind for me.
Okay. I have some more football questions that came in here.
Okay.
Rajon asked, should I worry about our punter in the A&M game due to him never actually punting in a game?
Well, I'll tell you what, he's probably not going to understand the accent of some of the people at Kyle Field, so he won't know that he's getting trashed by them and the swaying thing that they do. He's not going to know what that is, but I think he's played in enough of Australian rules football game that, and I mean, this is a 24-year-old grown man, and I think he's going to have a chance to, work through all that. So I would not be particularly concerned. If this was a freshman, I might feel a little bit different, but this is a guy that's played Australian rules football and is 24 years old.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the moment being too big for him, but can he punt? Like, can he do that consistently when, you know what I mean? Like it's actually on the line. You need
Leonard Moore said something about an 80-yard punt that he saw in practice. So,
so yeah, but can he do that consistently? And I think obviously doing it with hang time and not putting the coverage unit in a bad spot can also be something that is important for punters as well. So I'm interested to see what James Rendell can do in his college football debut. All right, Mike DeVoy asked, it seems like we have an embarrassment of riches at boundary receiver with Bo Collins, Jaden Thomas, Deion Colsey, and Micah Gilbert. Can any of them play any of the other receiver positions?
I think Jaden Thomas can. We've seen him in the slot before, although you have a bunch of slot receivers. I'm not sure that maybe Bo Collins could go over and play the field position. If anybody can get more of them on the field at the same time, it's Mike Denbrock. But I do agree that side is more loaded than the field side.
Yeah, and that's what makes the Bo Collins of it all so confusing and uncertain, because it's like, well, I mean, yes, he could be great, but he also could be third on the depth chart if those guys like ascend. So I think that's why he's one of the bigger focuses that I will have going into camp to figure out what he's like. Thomas is a slot. I think of that group in terms of guys that could play field, Micah Gilbert would be my choice. I think he has maybe sorry, excuse me. I was trying to hold out that sneeze and get out this answer, but I couldn't do it. I think Micah Gilbert maybe has the better top end speed of those guys, and so maybe that he could play the field receiver as well. Again, sorry for sneezing there. I really was trying to get to the cough button, but couldn't do it.
All right. So do you want to jump into recruiting since we're running a little short on time? And I know we have some recruiting questions, or do you want to still talk a little bit more football?
We can jump into recruiting.
Okay. Let's go to recruiting.
Since I haven't been here for so long.
So the 0-for-3 wide receiver crisis happened when you were on vacation. What's your take on that and Indy's plan to finish strong at the position?
Yeah, certainly it's not a good look for Notre Dame. I think the one that hurts the most, it should be probably pretty obvious, is Derek Meadows. For a long time, he was, I think, the most important target for Notre Dame, both in terms of need and perception. And to lose him to Brian Kelly at LSU, of all people, is a really painful pill to swallow. Maybe Notre Dame can flip him later on. I don't have great hopes. I don't think you should have great hopes for that. But Notre Dame likes him enough, I think, that it will at least continue to try to kick the tires and see if maybe things can go back their way. The decisions from Tanook Hines and Dylan Robinson were less surprising, but I don't know that it made it necessarily less painful just because of Notre Dame's need. Notre Dame needs the speed that Hines plays with, and instead he's going to USC and without Meadows, especially Notre Dame wanted someone with the size that Dylan Robinson has, and he instead chose to go to Washington. In terms of what's next for Notre Dame, I think Notre Dame has been working on a plan behind the scenes in terms of who it wants to target. I should say, I think I've learned, I believe this is the case. That's what I've been told. But I expect those names to sort of be kept under wraps until it gets closer to when any of those guys would visit Notre Dame for games this season. I think the one, maybe if you want to look for a silver lining, that the timing of this sort of allows Notre Dame to continue to evaluate guys that maybe had question marks about heading into their senior seasons, and maybe some guys jump out with some early season performances that maybe put them higher up on Notre Dame's list than they were before, and maybe Notre Dame can find some untapped potential with the receivers that are still out there. And maybe there's some other guys that maybe the teams that they're committed to start out with start their seasons off poorly. And that opens the door for an opportunity for Notre Dame to start pushing to flip them. Certainly not an ideal situation for Notre Dame as it relates to receiver recruiting, but I think it still can be salvaged to make it a somewhat respectable class. I think the idea that this is going to be one of the best position groups in Notre Dame's class is probably gone at this point, but maybe Jerome Bettis Jr. and Elijah Burris really ball out, and you raise the expectation for those guys. I think something that I believe would help Notre Dame is if the offense starts off the season well and the passing game has a lot of success, and maybe that can start to sway people Notre Dame's way at that position.
How about if we go to some recruiting questions next, and then we can finish up?
Sure. Jeff Stevens asked, is Notre Dame really in the hunt for number 1 2026? He said offensive tackle Tyler Merrill. He's the number 1 offensive guard, actually, so that might have just been a typo. Is he an ND fit? What schools are our competition? Yeah, I think Notre Dame is definitely in the thick of it for Tyler Merrill. He was on campus the last week for the Grill and Chill, and I think
along with most of his family,
a lot of sort of he's from Pennsylvania. Penn State's in the mix there, obviously. Ohio State's in the mix. I think those will probably be the 2 biggest hurdles. Michigan is interested as well. So I think those will probably be the teams that will be on the short list for Tyler Merrill moving forward. But I do expect Notre Dame to be in the hunt probably till the end for Tyler Merrill, and we'll see if Notre Dame can get him in the class as someone that Notre Dame is high on, and the interest seems to be pretty mutual at this point. Jeff Stevens asked the big question that I've addressed on the Insider Lounge, so I won't get into too many details. I wanted to sort of save those for our subscribers on the message board. But Jeff says, well, you might as well start with the Deuce Knight situation. What's up with Auburn? So I reported on the Insider Lounge that Deuce Knight, according to a source, visited Auburn this past weekend. Deuce Knight being Notre Dame's 2025 quarterback commit. I have intel on sort of the reaction to that and how things may be moving forward for Notre Dame. But like I said, I just reported that within the last couple hours on the Insider Lounge, so I don't want to give that away here on a free platform, but maybe that'll give those of you who aren't committed to us, which I know Jeff Stevens is, some influence to go check out the reporting there on the Insider Lounge. And I guess it's probably as good of a time as any to promote our NDYT 30-day free trial code for a subscription at InsideNDSports.com if you're interested in that. Auburn is now added to the list of teams that are really trying to flip Deuce Knight from Notre Dame, and we'll see how things play out moving forward. All right. I think that, let's see. Rajon says, does the media get invited to Grill and Chill? Seems right up your alley.
I was there to take pictures of the recruits. I was not asked to either grill or chill, but we did get lunch at the stadium today, and it was really delicious.
Yes, we did. We did get full, did get food full. I'm the fool. Rajon had another question. Rank the top 4 guys in rushing attempts come season's end. I know this isn't recruiting, but I figured I'd throw it in here since he had a question here late.
I will go with Love, Price, Leonard, and I'm going to go Keedron Young.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Love, Price, Leonard, Young. I think that's probably where I would go. I wouldn't be like, would it be crazy if Devin Ford was this 3rd running back? I don't know that it would be. Like, you're putting a lot of expectations on Keedron Young or Aeneas Williams to be able to step up with Jabron Payne injured. So I liked what Devin Ford did. They didn't use him a lot in terms of carries, but I think he's someone that you would like to think they have trust in as sort of a veteran player, even though they moved him to defense in the spring and now he's back on offense. But so I think that would be one maybe wild card to throw in there.
Right. Why I picked Young is because there's nobody on the roster that's his size.
Yeah.
And if he can play, if he can pick up all the things he needs to do, he gives them something different than the other guys.
Yeah, and Jabron Payne was obviously that short yardage guy that Notre Dame liked to use and Dylan McCullough liked to use last year, and so that is potentially a roll up for grabs if Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price can't come through there.
Okay. No more recruiting questions?
No, I just a couple of comments here. Xander Cruz says the media aren't offensive recruits. They should be allowed. I think maybe he means shouldn't, but I don't know. BVG should be coach. I just like that name, and I maybe he's a Van Gorder. BVG should be coach. Said watched one show. Let's see what you guys got. So hopefully we're wrapping it up here. BVG should be coach, but go back and watch what we had, and hopefully you enjoy either our insights or our sense of humor or both.
Tyler, do you think Notre Dame's close on either of the linebackers, Madden Framo or Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng?
Close in terms of being the top contender, yes. Close in terms of getting a commitment, I don't think so. There hasn't been any indication that I've heard of that these guys are ready to wrap things up. I think there was a hope that maybe they would be sooner rather than later, and I think that would have maybe played into Notre Dame's hand. But I don't think that's where things are headed right now. So we'll see how things go moving forward. Hoping to learn some more there in the coming weeks. But yeah, there's nothing that seems to be imminent in terms of decisions from those guys. But I do still think that Notre Dame is in a good position for both of those guys. USC hosted Framo this past weekend for an unofficial visit, and he's from out there in California, and he's visited USC plenty of times. So it's just maybe another reminder that you can't really rule out the Trojans, who have been really pushing hard for linebackers, but have at least as it relates to guys that Notre Dame's going up against have struggled to get the guys they want.
And the 2026s, any good news with wide receivers in that class?
No, not really. Unfortunately, I think that is one of the bigger. Obviously, Dylan Faison's in the class, but there's not a long list of guys. It's like, okay, these are the receivers I could definitely see in Notre Dame's class. I think the defense is probably in better shape in terms of targets. Now, obviously, that they do have the only two commits are on the offensive side of ball, so you can't sort of take that away from the offensive coaching staff that they do have commitments from Noah Grubbs and Dylan Faison. But I think Notre Dame's trending more with some defensive guys in the 2026 class than offensive guys right now.
All right. Well, use code NDYT for a 30-day free trial of InsideNDSports.com, and maybe you could say it more clearly than I just did. Thanks to Legacy Heating and Air. Thanks for Tyler for being back. Thanks for Tom Lemming for getting his phone to work after it started melting. Thanks to Bob Morton for filling in for 3 weeks. Thanks for all the great questions and comments, and even the average ones. And Tyler, I'll let you close.
Yeah. Glad to be back. Glad that football is on the way. I can't believe it's already here, but I am ready for it. I hope you guys are all as well. And yeah, we'll have plenty of information and observations coming your way on the Insider Lounge and on InsideNDSports.com once we get to see practice on Wednesday and start talking to some folks around the program as well. So stay in touch with us there. We'll be back with Football Never Sleeps, like I mentioned at the top of the show, back in a weekly mode. We'll probably aim for Mondays, but we'll see if we have to switch it up sometimes. And then we need to get back in the Inside ND Sports podcast mode, because it's been a while since we recorded one of those. But hopefully for those of you who listen to us strictly in the audio version have been enjoying the Football Never Sleeps in its stead. So we'd like to get you both of those. So we'll be back with the podcast hopefully sooner rather than later. All right. Enjoy the week and get ready for some Notre Dame football.